will call the Policy Committee meeting to order, May 20th, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I always forget.
I couldn't even
I
remember
forgot
how
one
many
once she corrected me. No?
No? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we can start with the administrative hiring policy. You all have, you received in your packets the sample policies that Dr. Finan shared with me. And I also want to apologize. I already talked to Mr. Borthwick about it. Mr. Lush isn't here, but I'll apologize to him. The email between Dr. Kirian and I said that I was going to discuss this with Tom Schuster and call Bob and Barb and loop personnel in. And then I had a conversation with Dr. Finan that made me think we could really just skip that step and sit here and have this conversation all together. So,
And I had a conversation with Dr. Finan too. This is an administrative regulation, it is not a policy. And the superintendent and administration do admin regulations. So I made some suggestions in an email to you, Katie.
yes.
And that is where, you know, administration would like to go with the policy based on the discussion that the board had.
Okay.
So the policy that everyone was given was the original policy that you had all discussed with the red and the green in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after we had the conversation, my suggestion was to remove the essay requirement. That candidates would be asked 10 questions and get 12 points for each one instead of 10 points, and then the scoring would not have to change. That we would work on a scoring rubric that would allow panel members to score each question on a 12-point scale. And I gave examples below.
Right.
But the rubric would be more flushed out. And then panel members, as we do now, would be provided with a list of sample questions, which we do now. And then we give ample time for them to make edits to the questions or to develop their own question. And so as the administrative regulation, that is my suggestion of how I would like to move forward on this. I spoke to Dr. Finan today. She felt comfortable with what I'm recommending.
And does that then remove the ancillary scoring from the policy? This then just relies on the rubric, or does the ancillary scoring?
No, the ancillary scoring still would take place, that the questions are worth so many points now, and the essay is taken out. So instead of each question being worth 10 points, each question would be worth 12 points, and the ancillary scoring would stay,
Okay.
but the essay is out. So that was worth 20 points, and now the 20 points are accounted for in the questions.
Because one of the things that Dr. Finan and I discussed, which had come up before me, she made an excellent point about diversity, which is an issue we've discussed here as a board and seemed to be a focus that we all wanted to pursue.
And I think we have a statement. The Scranton School District affirms that all employment practices, the very last thing, we had added that.
Okay.
So that would take care of the discrimination, not discrimination, but the diversity.
Right, right. And, I mean, is everyone in agreement that with the ancillary scoring, and I mean, if this is beyond our purview, forgive me.
It is beyond your purview because the board develops policy to pretty much explain that you want a hiring policy and you want us to go forward and get the best and brightest people. That's the what that the board wants. The how it's going to be done is the administration piece. That's how it works.
We were told that in training.
And I've been
PSBA
saying
training.
that all along. We can't cross over. And PSBA lists this as an admin reg. They are recommending that also.
When you go ahead and state administrative, just,
Central office staff.
okay, so
Superintendent
anybody,
and her
anybody above
designee.
what, I don't want to say pay scale, but what job? Would it be all jobs? Would it be?
No, it's the superintendent and
Right.
her designee. In this case, for hiring, it would be Mr. Castrovich.
Okay, all right. So that's kind of where it is limited to?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
And I believe in the Del Valley pieces, the superintendent really had the authority. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, that's correct. And we did have administrative regulations, we just didn't have any point system, so ours was different. We didn't have any point system, but the administrative regulations are just that. They're developed by administration to, for clarity of the interpretation of policy, so.
Principals used to write them for their building. We had policies and we had to write them and submit them.
Yeah, it really is, it just helps everyone follow the policy clearly, and that's what it really is meant to do.
Okay. If no one else has concerns, I guess we can move on.
Actually, when would this be implemented if that's, we're all,
You were hoping that we could do this, suspend the rules and do this on first read at the June
Yes,
meeting,
so we can
right?
get to hiring,
makes sense. Okay, thank you.
so. Bert can have that ready in this format for the packet, for the work session packet, and then the vote would be at the work session. I'm sorry, at the board meeting, okay?
So we're having the first read at the
No, we're going to suspend first read, second read, and ask the board to vote on the policy so we can move on with this. I think it's been on the table for
forever.
a year.
So we're going to ask Mr. Audi, I'm gonna have to tell him that, then when
Yeah.
the agenda's set, and go right to the vote.
Well, actually, here's another piece. You don't really have to vote on an administrative regulation.
Oh, okay.
That's the superintendent's.
You might want to have Attorney Audi just review it,
Sure.
I think.
I think he's seen this one already. And I also sent it to our labor attorneys, and they felt, aside from developing the rubric, that this was a very solid policy, and in fact, did more than a lot of other districts do.
So we don't have to vote on administrative regulations,
No, I
correct?
don't vote on
Okay.
admin regs.
So,
Can I just ask Dr. Fine, you don't see any downside to this?
You don't vote on administrative regulations.
I understand.
Right.
Well, with what you're doing as far as
My recovery
your
plan?
recovery plan?
No, it would, actually, the recovery plan is going to direct you all to follow the state regulations and code of ethics. I mean, it's really going to be, you have to, as a public entity, public school district, you have to follow the public school code, and that covers the policies. Okay, and I know that you do follow PSBA's policies, and when you need recommendations or in new policies, they are given to you from PSBA, so then you just adopt them. No, I do not see any downside. And as Dr. Kieran said, she already has had an attorney review it. I think it's always good to have attorneys review, just so you don't, there's some word in there that doesn't make sense or something. So that
so
was
we
my
don't
only
have to
recommendation.
vote on it, why are we voting on it then?
We don't have to vote on an admin regulation. I have several admin regulations, you know, how I direct staff that we will conduct business on a day-to-day basis. Those things you don't vote on.
Right.
I think it probably was questioned at a couple meetings, so it was probably good to review it here.
So it's reviewed.
What's next, Ms. Gilmore?
The director application.
I had a question
Sure.
about this.
Mhm.
So is this the original application with the last question added?
No, there's a bit of, there's a little bit more information. I added Article 3, Section 322 of the school code,
Yeah.
that little bit. And I did share this with Attorney Audi, and he was comfortable with my bringing these recommendations forward.
Okay, I had a suggestion.
Mhm.
The last question, after discussion, Dr. Feynman and I decided that it would be a good idea for your consideration to think about adding the word fees, because the waste disposal is a fee. So the
Okay.
way I've worded it is, do you have any current delinquent taxes, comma, fees, or disputes? Yes, no, if yes, explain the status. So we took out the word previously, because previous really is in the past, it's obviously taken care of. If it's not, it's current. So it was kind of,
I guess I was thinking of it in the way that there's a distinction between current year, the way things get turned over. There's, like, the city collects if you're a delinquent on your, just this past year, but there can be, then it goes to all those other entities if it's beyond that.
Mhm.
So that was my reasoning there.
You could get rid of the word.
Outstanding,
Yeah.
outstanding fees.
Yeah.
Outstanding. It's
Yeah,
not
and you can
current.
get rid of the word current, and then that'll cover everything.
okay. So if everyone is okay with that terminology, it reads, do you have any outstanding delinquent taxes, fees, or disputes? If yes, please
What
explain.
would constitute a dispute?
You know when we have tax assessments?
Oh, that would count?
Yeah, people
Dispute, yeah.
dispute the value of their property, and they try to fight it, so the property is valued at less and they have to pay less.
Do we need to know about that particular thing? Like, that doesn't seem like a.
This language, the dispute piece, was a recommendation of PSBA when we reviewed this with, I believe, policy 610 in terms of the bidding and contracts and checking this when that situation was at play. So I think we also have to take into account perhaps tweaking the wording on policy 610 and to include fees there as well. But disputes was, like, someone could be actively disputing their situation,
Gotcha.
saying one
Okay.
thing and the taxing body is saying another, so that covered that.
And they
Okay.
could have past disputes, I mean, they could have years of disputing it, so we want to do that.
So are we still good with the language? Do you have any outstanding? Okay, and then you want to tweak that same language in policy 610?
Yes,
Okay, got it.
yeah.
All right.
And is there anything anyone else would like to see? I mean, this does not replace the questions that are in the policy that we can ask if we are interviewing a candidate. Is there anything anyone else would like to add?
And Katie, just to make it clear, none of these questions preclude a person.
Absolutely not.
Maybe we should note that on there.
Mhm.
So we could add an affirmative answer or a yes answer does not preclude you from
Sure,
applying.
sure.
Just to protect ourselves.
Mhm. Okay. And then we can move on to the attendance at meeting via electronic communications. Get these things all in order, and then I mess up my files. I do all the time.
Now, we did talk about this one, and I will, this is a policy, of course, and, well, actually, it's a local board procedure. Okay, so I'd like to suggest some language and then open it up for your discussion. Under guidelines, a board member who attends a meeting through electronic communication shall be considered present only if the member can hear everything said or can hear what is communicated directly by the board secretary. And all those attending the meeting can hear everything said or communicated by the board secretary from the member or by the member. If the board president determines either condition is not occurring due to extenuating circumstances, he shall terminate the board member's attendance through electronic communications. And I think Mrs. Dixon actually asked the solicitor to give his judgment on that. So what Dr. Feynman and I discussed today is that we leave this building often to go to schools. The setup there is not ideal for people to participate in a meeting. When I was talking with all of you, I got disconnected and called right back. Why that happens, we don't know. But we don't have a state-of-the-art system where we could be so stringent. So at the last meeting, if you all recall, Ms. Orr was saying, Mr. Lesh, and she was saying it loudly so we could all hear, you know, they said blah, 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 and then Mr. Lesh said blah, blah, blah. When I'm sitting at the meeting, I'm sitting next to Paul, we're way over on the other side. I sometimes can't hear what you're saying or Mr. Borthwick is saying, and we're right on the stage together. So our thing is, should there be an extenuating circumstance where the meeting is continuing, but there's some electronic, or a reason why our electronic system is not working, then it would be the board chair's call to decide whether it's an extenuating circumstance or not.
I'd like to just add to that, we're in the middle of a stage. Now, in this setting, we could hear each other, but depending on the school or the setting that we're in, oftentimes I can't even hear what you're saying down there.
No.
Or Mr. Duffy, Mr. Schuster. And so the board secretary is the one taking the minutes. So if we're having difficulty with that, I think we need to flag each other. Like I'm running the meeting, if you can't hear somebody be taking the meeting, we need to pause the meeting and.
And I especially, Mr. Schuster, how many seats do you sit down from me? About 2 or 3?
This many.
Just this many. And when Mr. Schuster turns his head to speak to the rest of the board, then I'm always leaning over and asking, what'd you say, Mr. Schuster? Because I never heard anything he said. Or Mr. Rowdy, who sits next to me, often says, what did they say? What did he say? What did she say? So the acoustics just aren't conducive.
Why do we travel around as much as we do? You know, I understand the kind, I've heard it's because what you want, citizens of participation. We're not 30 miles away from one board to another. This is the central administration office. Unless there's a meeting, unusual conflict or whatnot, and you need a larger setting than this. I mean, I've been to these meetings. I mean, I don't see any overflow crowds. This is the place I think the board should meet.
Unfortunately, one of the issues is that this building is not easily handicapped accessible.
Well, some of the settings that we've been into, I don't know how easily handicapped they are either.
So now maybe
I mean, this is a
Virginia
simple fix. I mean, you know, we spend a lot of money on a lot of things. You see these little gadgets on television where people sit on a chair, they go up, they attach this thing to a banister, and then it's easily handicap accessible. I mean, and then we're here. And there's no problem with anybody understanding anything or hearing anybody or anything like that. But when you're in a setting of a huge auditorium like South Scranton or West Scranton or something like that, and there's 25 people in the building. And this whole arrangement is not a horseshoe, it's set up this way, and people can't hear each other. And you know, you feel like a jerk. What did he say?
What did you say?
couldn't-
Can you repeat
you know,
that?
And the people are out there that are listening, you know, out in the crowd, they're saying, "Geez, look, they don't know what they're talking." Not that we don't know what we're talking, but you can't hear anybody.
I do think the point of the horseshoe is a
Well-
very good one. I mean, there's no reason that the tables couldn't be set up. that
Yeah,
way.
there isn't enough
Right.
room, really, on the stage. That would push Mrs. Dixon and the group that's close to her a little further back, even back further. And on the floor, the horseshoe
No, of course,
doesn't
on the
work.
floor.
Obviously, you use a PA system, correct?
Yes.
So would a simple solution just add another speaker to the stage so everybody can hear?
I think what happens is I think the crowd can hear us, it's hard.
We
You
Well,
can't hear
that's-
each other.
That seems to be what the discussion is right now, that everybody's having a problem hearing each other.
We need a monitor, you know.
So now the other.
If you have
3
the
days
ability
notice.
just to hook up another speaker off the PA, then
Is that possible? I mean, you know what the
There actually are
acoustics.
monitors.
I have an IT person right here with
Right,
us.
right.
I'd like to ask his opinion, being that he's a specialist. So you understand what everyone is saying. We can't
Exactly.
hear each other.
Honestly, I think one of the biggest problems that you have when you're in one of the larger auditoriums isn't so much the space itself, it's the proximity of yourself to your microphone. Mr. Shush, you understand this. When you're the farther away you are from a microphone, the more we have to turn up the volume. It's called the gain. So, the farther away you are, the more that has to be turned up, the more prone it is to feedback. So we have monitors on stage, but the problem is we usually have to run your microphone so high so you're heard out front. The monitors become almost useless. So the biggest thing you can do to help yourselves is to stay within 6 or 8 inches of that microphone, and that will help the audience hear you and you hear each other because we'll be able to utilize the monitors that are on stage.
And sometimes I hear from the audience,
We can't hear you.
shouting out, "We can't hear you, we can't hear you."
Yeah,
Yeah,
they say
they're
that to
sitting
administrators
75
when they're
rows
sitting in the
back.
seats, not up at the,
The administrators usually
well,
go
sometimes
to
they don't come to the podium, they stand from the
Yeah.
chair,
They're
and that's when you
instructed to
normally
do
hear.
so.
I think with this, it's the electronic communications actually.
yeah, well,
not the
you're talking
microphone
two
system.
separate issues.
Is 3 days enough time, if we had this submitted within 3 days, that someone can't attend, is that enough time to have a meeting here rather than one of the schools?
When
Or is
you
that throw
post,
off?
Virginia.
Well, depending on the day, if it's.
That's what I mean, you probably
Yeah.
know more than
If
me.
it's a Friday, it's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna get it in there. If it's a Tuesday, yes. So if I put it this way, if I receive it after Wednesday,
Yeah.
we're pushing it.
So
But
you're
it-
saying, work days.
That's what I was just gonna say,
That's
so
what-
we amend the
that's
policy to
what
say
we
3
need to
work
say.
days.
Yes, because I couldn't get anything on a Friday afternoon. It's not gonna be enough time.
Yeah, the agenda's done, everything's in the, it's going home.
So that would be number 1, submit such request to the board president at least 3 work days prior to the meeting.
That covers if you're going on vacation, if you know you're not going to be there. What about the board member that gets sick? And that day they cannot attend, but they don't want to miss the meeting. So we alienating people from getting sick, or an emergency to occur where they could attend the meeting, but they just can't be here?
That's still in the policy though.
Okay, where?
Submit such request to the board president at least 3 days. I mean, if it's 3 days working or 3 days, I don't know, what do 3 days not working feel like? Maybe no.
I'm talking the day of.
But that would still be the case with someone who's ill.
We're talking about this,
If we're still making an exception for someone who is ill, to inform you the day of the meet, like, we're kind of not making that exception for someone who's ill. Someone who is stricken ill the day of a meeting is out of luck.
well, what Mr. Schuster's point, I think, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're saying if we have enough notice, that we can just move the meeting here for the sake of the communication purposes. that makes sense, but that's different than a regular, let's say, just 3 days, that's why 3 work days makes sense. Then we can move the meeting from Scranton High School to here, then we'll have no problems with electronic communication because we have a much better setup here. I mean, that sounds like it sounds pretty.
But if the meeting's already advertised, Virginia, you
That's
have
why
to
it's gotta be-
re-advertise the meeting again, correct?
Well, when I advertise at the beginning of, everything is advertised at the beginning of the year in January. When we
Okay.
pass the local rules, that's when I advertise the Mondays and all that, so it's all set. So I would only have to, I'm only advertising one time, because I already did it at the beginning of the year.
Can I, and here I go again,
Does that make
sorry.
sense to you?
Yeah.
Oh,
You're talking electronic communication, okay? So my big concern is obviously electronic is a medium, okay? If you have somebody that can't make it, whether it be work-related or whatever, isn't that really what it's for, despite the time frame? If a person can't be here at 6 o'clock when the meeting starts, isn't that really what it's for? Yeah, just a question.
One other point, as far as the meetings not being here, is there an additional cost when we meet over in one of these high schools or intermediate schools? I mean, are we paying somebody overtime to go to a meeting and set these things up and?
Well, we always pay overtime, like tonight, we're paying overtime.
No, but I mean like the logistics, to set the thing up on stage, to move the chairs around and all this other
They
stuff.
usually try to do that during the day, and then we pay overtime for them to be present at the meeting, to tape and so
Well,
on,
we're in a,
as we do here.
So is the cost the
we're
same?
in
Pretty
a
much.
recovery status. and-
So the cost
Dr.
is
Curie
the same.
just said that the cost is
It's
very much
pretty
the
much
same,
the same.
because there is still the cost for the people to be
Yeah.
present at the meeting and
Yeah.
the
Now,
logistics they try to
have-
do during the school day.
We found that when we have a discussion that we know many people will want to come to, we would like to have it in a bigger venue. So Scranton High seems to be the place where we have the most success with the whole logistics piece as far as technology is concerned. So if you were to have your meetings here all the time, and then if you had a topic for discussion, for example, I'm thinking of the recovery plan, Dr. Finan, when we're ready to roll that out, I'm sure a large group of people would come that would be held at our alternate location, which would be Scranton High.
Better have an awareness day for that.
So you could have your primary location be the board room at the ad building and your secondary location at Scranton High, if you felt you wanted to do something like that. The acoustics are best there. West side, we can't hear a thing.
now we'll see on the 3rd how Western meeting is. So I'm kind of glad that this is all fresh in everybody's mind, so that, because Northeast is terrible. South
Yeah,
is
south
terrible.
is
Can't
is
hear at
not
either
good.
one of
West
those
side
schools.
high
High
is
school
not
It's the
what's good.
same, so.
So it would be one of the two, that would be
And
the
then we're
alternate
serving both
location.
sides of the city, if we,
But that could be done, I think the board has done a great job of spreading themselves out throughout the city with taking your particular topic on the road. You go to the different areas and you meet people and you talk about what is the major advocacy that the board is working on at the moment and what you would like support for. So that kind of falls in line with what we had discussed several years ago about area board meetings, where the board actually goes out and meets people throughout the city.
So
it
we
wouldn't
just
be like
changed the
you went-
location for the last meeting, right, the night of the rally, that committee meeting, didn't we move that to Scranton High?
Yes.
We did, yeah, because normally the committee meetings are held here, and you had asked, and that was a great forum,
Mhm.
if
Do you
we could
recall
move
how
it
many
down
days
there.
that was?
I don't recall.
That was pretty much in advance because we knew we were gonna get that done. that's.
It was in advance of the meeting, but, you know, Katie said we might have a big crowd for that, and I said, good point. And we did.
I have a suggestion. To answer the point about illness, someone is stricken ill on that day, if you want to consider under number 1, you could add a statement, if a board member becomes ill on the day of the meeting, an exception to the 3 work days will be made, just call the board secretary. Something like that, if you wish to consider that. I think it's a fair answer to somebody who does become ill on that the day. Maybe they become ill Sunday night and they can't make it, so that, because under authority, you address illness at the top, but it's hard to know that you're going to be 3 work days, you're going to be ill 3 work days in advance, so.
And then the protocol should be that they contact Virginia,
I
she lets
think-
me know.
Correct.
And then we notify the whole board that that's happening.
Yeah, I
And
think
then
as
we
long as
have
they
to have
put
time to set it up.
Virginia, yeah. That would make it fair, I think, for everybody.
So we're adding another line to number 1. And the word work before days,
Yes.
correct?
Yes. The other thing that I contemplated in reviewing this was, I was wondering if we need a number 4 here, as we discussed when we dropped the call at the last meeting. In the event of technical issues, the meeting will recess, for a period to be determined at that time. I mean, I think we need to think about the way that's worded so that it
That's
can't
good.
go on for 3.5 hours while we
And
try to
then
connect
somebody
this call.
comes on.
Yes.
Right. So say that again, Katie, and then
Number 4,
clarify for the board, so that.
in the event of technological issues, the meeting may be recessed for a number of minutes to be determined by the board. So someone could make a motion to
Recess for.
15 minutes while we try to connect this call.
I think that's fair.
And I recall us doing that in the past. I do recall that, so that would be a good addition. I would suggest you.
Do we want to determine the number of minutes at this time? Do we want to say for up to 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Paul just suggested 15 minutes.
Well, I think I said 10, but 10 or 15. I think 10 would be fair.
So 10, I'm fine with
Okay.
10.
That's fine. If it's not gonna get fixed after 10, it's
10
not getting
minutes.
fixed.
Right.
And
So I think
that's
that's the
upon,
real issue at hand here, is not being able to hear the person on the person on the phone not being able to
Right.
hear us.
Now,
and Virginia's going to notify us if the call is dropped. You will know that?
I hope so, because sometimes you're talking and they could be dropped and I wouldn't even know. That's the other thing I was thinking of.
But you usually say, have you heard, did you hear that? If they don't respond, I hear you say,
Correct.
did you hear that?
But when-
And then you say, oh, they're not there.
Then we make a
Yeah.
motion.
Yeah,
Right. But knowing when they dropped, I wouldn't.
yeah. Well, from the time we know, I mean, yeah, yeah.
I
I'm
mean, as
sorry,
long-
Ginny, you're getting a lot of jobs in this policy. I'm quite concerned about
But
it.
she was doing those jobs automatically anyway. We're not asking her to do anything more than she hasn't already been doing. And that was demonstrated at the last
Right,
meeting.
right. But I mean, we are asking her to jump in on conversation as well, right? We're not just saying,
Yeah, I
please,
know,
that's the piece that concerns me. Like, I'm not concerned about, I read a resolution and Ginny says, did you hear that, Mr. Borthwick? And he says, sort of, and we repeat it. I'm not worried about that. I'm concerned about Ginny trying to navigate. Greg said yes, and Paul said no, and Katie said, you're all nuts. I'm worried about that piece of it.
Well, from, just recently being on a call myself, I remember asking for clarity.
Yeah.
Or saying, Mrs. Dixon, I didn't get that, can you repeat that?
So
You know,
I think that's
that
a
would
piece
be
that we
on
all
the
need to
person.
understand as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would be on the person
Yes.
who's on the call, it's your responsibility, right?
Now,
Yes.
historically, Mrs. Orr, how many, we really didn't have,
We haven't had that many,
yeah, this is a recent issue that we're crossing that bridge now.
right.
You should have a second phone number if the call gets dropped and the person knows it's dropped.
I
It's
did
your
that.
cell, isn't it?
Well, I did that, because I
Yeah.
called the
Text it.
number, I took that phone and I called my cell phone to see what number it was. So when I texted Mr. Lesh to call me back, it was ringing out in the main office. That was another thing that, so.
We just have to have direction as board members, if we're one of those people on the other end, what to do
Yeah.
and what number to call.
Right.
How does, has anybody ever used, maybe you have Skype during a meeting? Yeah. Does it work better?
And go to meetings and,
Go to meeting, I use it all the
Zoom.
time. Zoom is a.
yeah,
is
there are
a-
lots of things like
I use
that.
GoToMeeting.
I don't know how difficult they would be to set up,
No.
On our end, not at all.
I
It would
don't,
just be
yeah,
the
but
board
on
members.
the person calling
Yeah,
in.
they would have to be set up to participate.
Which is probably not realistic either.
I don't think it's realistic. Maybe a second cell phone number that if they drop, you can call.
Do we think that there is the need for another sentence in this guidelines about that piece about clarity? So that the onus isn't only on the board secretary, but that, 'cause would you, Dr. Kirian, read again what you're proposing?
Yeah, under guidelines, a board member who attends a meeting through electronic communications shall be considered present only if the member can hear everything said or that is communicated by the board secretary at the meeting, and all those attending the meeting can hear everything said or communicated by the board secretary to the member.
Instead of inserting the piece about the board secretary there, could that be a second sentence instead, saying the board secretary may, had it, now it went, but may clarify what is stated, and the board member on the call is encouraged to request clarification. I
Sure.
just stated that terribly, I will think about it more.
Yeah.
But I think you know what I'm getting at.
I do.
And then, if the board president determines
That's right,
that
that's the next
the condition
sentence.
is not occurring and cannot be rectified by the board secretary, then that would be.
Okay, we'll work on that, that's
Thank
good.
you. I'll work on it too, because I didn't do that well.
And I wish you would call me with your changes, you could copy Bert, and
Okay.
if you'd like, you
Sure.
could copy Dr. Finan, but she's really not doing policy.
No.
Doctor, can we have a meeting without the superintendent being present?
Yeah, you can, but I usually am present,
Okay,
and
but
call
let's-
in if I'm not.
Okay, well, let's say, like, for example, the last time you were not present and we had the conference call.
Mhm.
Let's say the conference call went down in the middle of a board meeting, now what?
We can't get you back, what do we do?
I think that's a legal question that you should really
Well,
ask, because I think in the school code, you're supposed to have
That's what
a
I'm saying.
superintendent or a
Superintendent.
superintendent's
Designation, right, designate. So if she, for example, the superintendent is participating in one of these calls, and the call goes bingo, you just leave.
Okay, we will get a legal opinion on that part. Okay,
We'll work on that sentence and have
Yeah.
it forward to the work session.
all right.
Which also leads me, Dr. Kirian provided the 006 policy, if you don't mind my sneaking that into the agenda. That pertains to the recording of meetings.
Yes,
I,
and I,
obviously, that's happening, which is wonderful.
yes.
But I do think it would be good, if everyone agrees, to clarify when these are to be available online and also distributed to the public access
Yeah,
television.
so we had a system going, last year when the board requested this, no problem. We did restructuring in the IT department. I've assigned Bill Delpree, who will now handle that. Usually a day or two, correct me if I'm wrong, after the meeting, it's on YouTube. Is that correct?
Usually the next day, unless say the regular board meeting is extremely long, takes longer to render the video. But you try to do it within 24 hours.
So to say within 48 hours is
Oh,
reasonable?
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So that's the YouTube piece, Katie.
Right, so
Now-
that would be on, under minutes, the second to last sentence, all public meetings will be audio and video recorded, all audio and video records will be kept on file for a minimum period of 7 years.
Where are you? Which page?
I
please?
am
10?
on my 10 of 11. So all public meetings will be audio and video recorded. Perhaps there we would insert recordings will be available online within 48 hours.
Is that doable?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know that it's not as easily done for getting it to the TV station, correct?
Yeah, to get it to Mr. McGlure at ECTV, we actually have to physically burn a disc and deliver it to him.
I have excellent news. I talked to him today, and his new server will allow you to share that in a Dropbox.
Happy day.
Because I wanted to, I didn't think they were getting to him, but I wanted to confirm that with him today. So he can accept those via Dropbox, and he's willing to do the board meetings, the work sessions, the committee meetings as well. He's happy to put anything we share. He is also willing, if we agree, to put it on the ECTV YouTube page, which has a dedicated government section, so it would live with the city council meetings, which in my mind is a wonderful idea. And he said that he has 320 people following that at the moment, and it's growing every week. So, you know, it's a little bit of a duplication of efforts, but it's another way for people to access that, so.
So what's our time frame, Bill? Same?
I think so. I'll contact Mr. McGlure tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll get the information I need off him.
So then we would also include recordings will be available online within 48 hours and shared with, however we want to word that. I don't know if we specifically want to call it ECTV in case
Local access
of
channel.
our local, and shared with local access channel.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you for allowing me to sneak that in, and now we can move on to 003 BOG4, which is the role of directors and superintendent in governance and management. And this was simply a question I wanted to raise based on the Auditor General's recommendations that he shared. I have no idea when, because I missed what day today is, but a couple of months ago, and one of the recommendations was that we might want to infuse the role of the Chief Recovery Officer into this policy. I'm not sure that that's necessary, as I know Dr. Guinan's role is dictated by law, so I don't know if it's necessary to do that for the time being, or what everybody thinks of that.
I'm not sure you want to do that.
Okay.
Because anything could change if the plan isn't accepted, or you happen to, for whatever reason, go into receivership, then there's a whole different set of rules. So I think I would deal with that. Okay.
So, Dr. Finan, you're employed by PDE, not the Scranton School District.
Correct.
We have a recovery website,
Correct.
and on that website, we have the law, the Act 141,
Correct.
which defines your duties and responsibilities, correct? So I think this is really null and
And
void.
is that the job description, or?
Act 141 says exactly what Dr. Feinman's
Okay.
role is here.
Just because I feel like this is very clear, like this is kind of a layman, I don't know, perhaps it is the same, but I mean, this seems like something that would be easy for anyone to understand. I haven't looked at what's on the website, so maybe it's,
We have Act 141
okay.
on the website. I don't know what you have there, I haven't seen it.
This came with, I got it from you, I think. This came
What
with
is
Dr.
the
Feinman,
title?
this
Probably
job
the
description
job
for the recovery, chief recovery officer.
Well, we can place that on the recovery website, because that's her page.
Right.
I think,
Everything.
I think the act is really much
Much clearer than this?
just
Okay.
that, so I think.
You want to leave it
Okay.
just as
I
as
would-
the act?
That's fine, thank you. Okay. And then 337 vacation.
Mhm. Now, this one, I reached out to our attorneys to get some clarity on this. So, the way our school year contracts are, or our school year is, when our senior staff has leftover days accrued, this policy says they can carry them over to like March 31st. And they use them by then, or they lose them. We needed this to be more clear for our employees,
Okay.
so we got the language directly from our attorneys on how to protect ourselves and make it more clear.
Okay. So this isn't really a change, this is just a
Clarity.
clarification.
that
Oh,
word-
yeah.
that word
There's
has
one
changed.
word that's changed in green. If separation of employment accrues, it really should say, if separation of employment occurs.
That's what mine says.
That's what mine says.
Occurs or accrues?
Occurs.
Occurs is the correct word, that should be there. Somehow ours said you changed it, okay. And then prior to the end of the first quarter of the calendar year, no cash payments will be made for accrued but unused carryover vacation days. That's exactly what we wanted to read.
Okay.
So that protects us. So if someone leaves us, let's say they're leaving in March,
Mhm.
and their last day is March 29th, and that's a Friday, and they still have 8 days of vacation left, they're asking us to pay them out. We're not going to do that, because there's not, if that's a Friday, there's no way they could have used those 8 days. They should have used them or they lose them.
But am I understanding this correctly, that that is for the current year, not days accrued from previous years? Like if somebody worked in the district
Yeah.
for 4 years
No,
and kept a week vacation from each of those
No.
previous,
no.
they would still get compensated for those unused days, just not the new unused days from the current year.
The way the policy currently reads, we're just staying with the policy,
Okay.
okay? We're making it more clear in here that we're not going to pay you if you have extra days that you didn't use that were carryover days. It's the carryover that's.
So I think what Director Gilmartin was trying to say is and I may know the answer, but I'm not sure, so there's not an ability to carry over for years and years. You're just saying that the prior
Right.
year, you're able to carry over to the end of the first quarter of the next
Right,
year.
and if you
Oh,
use
okay.
it, great. If
Okay.
you don't, you lose it.
Okay.
But this only pertains to 12-month employees,
Yes,
correct?
that's
For
correct.
vacation days.
That's correct.
So how much time could be carried over? Do we have a set amount of time, like 40 hours can be carried to the next year? Or this is,
That-
no
Well,
matter what you have it?
If you could carry it over, but if you don't use it by the end of that quarter, you lose it.
I have a question. You have to use prior year's vacation by the first quarter of the year, basically March, correct?
Yes, by the end of
So
March.
at the most, you would carry over 1 year's vacation till retirement, at the most.
Yes.
Is that a to-do?
Well, let's take an example, okay? Last year, I contacted the board. I asked you if I could carry over my vacation weeks to this next year. If I didn't use them in this year, then I lose them. I don't get paid for those.
Right, no, I understand
And
that.
I may keep asking, but if I don't use them, I lose them. That's with any one of our employees, 12-month employees. Because you're supposed to use your vacation within the year that you have it.
And any carryover is gone by the first quarter.
Yes, the carryover is gone.
And is this whole section here is brand new? Or is it?
In the green, no, the policy states that, but we felt it wasn't made clear. So we asked our lawyers to give us some language to make it more clear for our employees, and this is what they gave us.
Because this is, now that you've explained that, this is kind of clarifying this last sentence of the previous
That's right.
paragraph.
That's
It
right.
is understood that these days must be used prior to the end of the first
Mhm.
quarter of the new calendar year, or they will be lost to the employee.
But you're making it clear they're not getting paid if they
Yes.
don't use them by the end of that quarter.
Any other questions? And then we have PSBA updates.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the first one on your list is 150 Title I comparability of services. If you look at the back, now we have a choice in method of determination. You'll see it in green. For purposes of determining Title I comparability, the district shall use a current year student-to-staff ratio calculation or a previous year per pupil expenditure determination, whichever is more favorable to the district. So this is good for us.
Yeah.
We think that's good. And then, if you look down at number 3 up under allowable exclusions, unexpected, the word is changed to unpredictable. And then you'll see complaints is separated there in green. Okay, the terminology is the same. Okay, and that's PSBA recommended language.
And that says policy 150 is mandated for those schools
Correct.
receiving Title I funds. Thank you.
Then 220, you'll see a lot of things crossed out in red. I believe we determined that some of this is repositioned, okay? And we feel that it is significant in the second or the third paragraph on page 2, where it talks about, if you go to about the 6th sentence down, well, it starts at number 3, when email, text messaging, or other technological delivery is used as a means of posting non-school materials using school equipment or while on school property or at school functions, it shall be governed by this policy. Off-campus or after-hours postings including technological postings that does or is likely to materialize or substantially interfere with the educational process, including some activities, schoolwork, discipline, safety, and order on school property or at school functions, threatens serious harm to the school or community, encourages unlawful activity, or interferes with another's rights is also covered by this policy. So you know I send you text messages often about something that was posted on Facebook after hours. At one time, it was, these are after hours, it doesn't affect us, but it surely does affect us, and so this is giving clarity to that. In fact, I was talking to Dr. Finan today about just this weekend, some posts that our students made or parents were threatening, and you deal with it right away, and we're responsible for that. Whereas before we said it didn't happen on school time, so it's the parents' concern. But now it is our concern.
So, I mean, this puts a great deal of responsibility on the district, but also gives you the right to take action if something is.
Yeah, and the safe to say, I think, is a big part of why this change is there, because we get feedback now pretty constantly about things that are occurring in school, after school, whatever time. So this covers all of that for us.
There used to be a lot of pushback when something occurred, and you had to deal with the parents, and they said, well, it happened over the weekend. Now this gives them teeth with the policy.
Yeah, the key words are likely to materially or substantially interfere. And in the olden days prior to this, it had to interfere before you could
Right.
do anything.
They had to bring it into the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this really gives you a lot more leverage.
Yeah.
It's really good.
And then, if you look on delegation of responsibility on the back of the next page, you'll see where it says, the superintendent shall assist the building principal in determining the designation, and it goes on and on. And then what is added there is that the building principal may determine the disciplinary action. Okay?
So does that mean then that the next part would be omitted? The building principal may determine disciplinary action may be determined by the administrators?
I think that has to come out.
Disciplinary. Building principal may determine disciplinary action.
For students who distribute?
Yes,
Yeah.
that
So
would
we're
come out.
omitting may be determined by the
Right.
administrators.
Yeah. And we do have a discipline policy that you passed. It's a tiered discipline system that is active. So we will continue to go that route. That gives the principals guidelines on what they're able to do.
And the PSBA information also says that school entities should review policies and administrative regulations and handbooks for language that may cause concerns of viewpoint discrimination, such as language prohibiting material that seeks to establish the supremacy of a particular religious denomination, sector, or point of view. This language does not appear in any PSBA policy guide or administrative regulation. However, PSBA has seen this language in local policies, and it is recommended that school entities review their local policies, procedures, administrative regulations, and handbooks to ensure that such language is not included, and to consult with your school solicitor for further guidance.
It used to
Now,
be,
every year,
it used to be,
we update our student handbooks.
Yeah.
All those updates go into BERT from what we've done in policy and from building principals.
right.
They're posted online and they're available for everyone.
We used to
So
work
we're
on
very
it
It's
proud.
ourselves.
ongoing, that's happening.
Yes, we have a process every year.
Public level principals used to get together and write the admin regs, and they would review it every summer.
That's what Bert does with our
Okay.
administrators. At summer leadership in August, everything is ready by
Yeah.
by that time. He usually has the handbooks ready, they all get a paper copy. All their suggestions, concerns, issues are all included in there. And then for the school year, they're posted on the
Exactly.
website. So 913, non-school organizations, groups, and individuals. So this again is a PSBA update. And you'll see as you go through it, several changes that are made. A lot of them define what something means. As we went through this, we got to page 3. At the top of the page, it says, "The board directs that the review and consideration of any activities requested under this policy shall not discriminate on the basis of content or viewpoint." And we had added that the board directs the superintendent.
Okay.
So,
Board
that
directs
is
the
my
superintendent
responsibility.
that the review, okay.
And then as the language for non-school materials is made stronger than what is crossed out in red. And we put, or are recommending, the board requires, this is in green, that non-school organizations, groups, or individuals who wish to distribute or post non-school materials on school property shall submit them to the superintendent. And that is the process we use right now. And we keep everything on file in the superintendent's office. So once a request is made through the superintendent's office, then I follow policy and approve or don't approve. If it is approved, it is sent to the building principal then who carries out. And that way we're able to keep more consistency across the district. And that's that, on that one.
It does look like on page 2, under posting, there may be something that should have been omitted as well.
What is that?
Posting shall mean issuing, publicly displaying non-school written materials on school property. Should publicly displaying be removed? That sentence just doesn't read right to me. I was wondering.
Issuing, shall mean issuing non-school.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay,
Marion, I
Yes.
think you want building principal in that following paragraph to read superintendent.
what now?
If approval is granted by the superintendent rather than the building principal.
Is there a number next to it? Can't find it. Right. I said I was gonna wear my glasses. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So in that second
So
paragraph,
back to that page.
Yeah.
Right.
On
Thank you,
page
Dr.
3.
Cronin.
the second paragraph in green should read, if approval is granted by the superintendent,
Right.
not the building principal. Thank you. And then 335.
Yes. So this one is about family and medical leave. And in our policy, we said that an employee to determine if an employee has exhausted his or her FMLA leave in any 12-month period, the district shall utilize a 12-month period beginning September 1 and ending August 31st. The suggested language from PSBA is saying in any 12-month period. So they're saying remove that September 1 to August 31st and just utilize a rolling 12-month period. So we're not being restricted by the school year.
Dr. Kurian, I just wanted to point out, I noticed the teacher contract, it says September 1 through August 31. So.
We're taking that out.
Would
That will be removed
From the teacher contract or from the policy?
from the policy. Bert, can you show John the red piece?
Right, I see that, but I think what I'm trying to point out is
Contradiction.
there's a contradiction between how we want to change the policy and the contract language, which is September 1 to August 31.
But what they're saying is you don't have to use the contract year, the school year.
So it's okay, so the policy can change, but I still will follow contract language?
That's right.
Okay.
What you have to know is that all employees aren't in the teacher's contract,
Right,
okay?
right. But I'm not positive, but I think they're all September 1 to August 31.
This gives more flexibility. We're not restricted by the school year for 261-day employees. Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding. This is a multiple choice test we have here?
This is a brand new one. And this is one that we don't necessarily need to adopt. You know, they're saying it's an optional one. This is all of that GoFundMe, all of those programs. You know how teachers do GoFundMe for new calculators, or a building principal might try to do it for new lockers or whatever. So this came about because some districts were really struggling with it. Let me see if I can find it on here.
It seems as though the first question we have to answer is whether or not we want to permit this.
Yes.
And then we go on from
Whether
there.
we want to,
Whether we want to permit crowdfunding or not.
we do now.
Right, but I mean, are
Yeah.
we making a choice? I mean, I'm not saying that we should stifle it, but we're making that choice.
Right now, we allow GoFundMe
Right.
type activities, and they
Are they
go
based
through the
on-
local individual school. We put in the technology policies, the new ones, that any equipment that is received through GoFundMe becomes Scranton School District property.
Okay.
Now, we don't say because it's our property, you can't have it, even though you
Right.
got it, you know, but it is our property, and we do tag it, and it does belong to the district.
Right.
So we already have that in our technology policies, our new technology policies.
So is it consensus that we do want to go down this road and look through the other multiple choice questions that we have here?
Right, that's,
Yes. So we're saying.
we are doing it.
Right.
You know, we
Yes,
have
yes.
some control over it. Anybody who wants to do one of these and order equipment, we've covered a lot of this in our new technology policies, saying that if you want to do this and it's anything to do with technology, we have to know what it is, and a committee decides if it works with our platforms that we currently have. So you're not doing a GoFundMe for some product that we can't match with our own platform.
But this goes beyond that.
This goes
This
beyond
is the
that.
overarching.
Right,
So we're saying, it's consensus here, I think.
this
We
is,
want to permit this, we want to continue to permit this.
yeah, this is a policy.
Check the first box,
But who approves these?
It gets into that.
that's where we.
Yeah, and we've changed, or we've made some recommendations through
Yeah,
here
I see that.
that we take out the board because this is not something you're involved in. So we've said we add the superintendent is in the technology policies, the business manager, the director of technology, the school principal, yes. So we have a committee that would determine on a case-by-case basis whether this is something that we would approve.
Well, that was my question when I saw the approval. The board was the first one on there,
Yeah?
which I thought it should be a committee or a building
Yeah.
principal.
These parentheses, I mean, you'll see in others, this is the PSBA sort of boilerplate, and we can pick what
Right,
it
okay.
is we want. So we're eliminating board, we're saying superintendent and business manager.
Director of technology and principal.
Okay.
So it's a team decision.
Okay.
As far as this is just for GoFundMe technology, and this is not going to affect the other booster clubs, the basketball boosters, whatever they are involved in, if they
Yes.
want to go
Yeah.
ahead and.
Yes.
If you look in the policy, it says eligible organizations, and it does mention booster clubs, parent organizations, school-sponsored student organizations, educational foundation, and it says other, and we said as approved by the superintendent.
So was your question that, does this encroach on other ways that these booster clubs find funding, or is it just dedicated specifically to GoFundMe? I think that it's a crowdfunding specific thing,
Yeah.
so it doesn't encroach on the annual bake sale that the booster club has to raise money.
Or to work in the football stand or anything, that kind of stuff.
Unless I am reading another language here, I think we have to go through this policy and determine which of these things we want to apply here,
Yeah.
right? So, the definitions, the eligible organizations, just like you just said, Ken, booster groups, parent organizations, school-sponsored student organizations, educational foundations. We're comfortable with all of that?
I think to answer Mr. Norton's question, I think it's just giving them another option.
Right, avenue of funding.
Well, yeah, no, the only thing, my only concern, okay, and you have a lot of fickle people out there. If you're going ahead and putting another restriction on booster organizations, are you going to be shooing parents away with, even though it's a good intent, what you're looking to do? Could this actually go ahead and be harmful to the boosters as you
Right.
know?
No, I don't think
Get
it's-
away from that traditional way of raising money to move to this type of thing, and then maybe this doesn't pan out or get the funding like the traditional ways once did. I could see that occurring.
But I don't think that this is intended in any way to change whatever anyone's doing. This is just here as an additional
Another option.
option that they may use if they like, as long as they.
Yeah, no,
Proceed
I
through
understand that,
proper
I'm just
procedure.
looking at the idea of recreating a false sense of restriction.
It's not, I don't think it's a restriction, I think it's an option.
And I think we
Okay.
have to put some parameters around things like that so that we are aware of what's going on. Because when we go out into the world and try to partner with other organizations, partner with other funders, we have no idea if some seventh grade student with a lot of enthusiasm, and so I think we just.
I understand
It's
what you're saying.
not, like I think Paul said, it's not an effort to stifle any of this.
I
It's
totally
simply
agree.
to put parameters around it so that we are aware, the administration is aware of what's happening. And I think that's very
It has to be
positive steps.
controlled, I would think,
Yeah,
It is.
it
not.
does.
and overseen.
I also think it helps make sure that these entities are legitimate.
Yeah.
You know, it does help to have another layer of oversight in this, because
Okay.
the internet is the wild, wild west, so.
Oh, yeah.
So
Anything can happen.
on the top of page 2 addresses your question, Katie.
Yes.
The board prohibits the use of crowdfunding by district employees or organizations on behalf of the district. We crossed that out,
So we're omitting
assuming
Yeah.
that this was something you would want to consider and allow.
Is there a version of this with your suggestions?
No, I'm going
Okay,
through
you're-
those now.
Okay,
Okay, so
that's good.
that's second line on the back of page 2, you cross that out. And then going to eligible organizations, you say other as approved by the superintendent. Then going to delegation of responsibility, we said the superintendent, business manager, IT director, and school principal. So that's a team.
Should the IT director just be when applicable? Because if someone were raising funds for a project that had nothing to do with IT.
Yeah, or it could be appropriate staff, right? If you want to think about, I'm thinking of Kevin's windmill, you know, project. If he wanted to do crowdfunding, the IT director might not be the right person, but
Right.
the facilities director might be.
Right.
So we could say superintendent, business manager, staff,
Building principal and
Principal.
appropriate department head.
yeah, or,
Supervisor.
You could also go with other as approved by super.
yeah.
Other,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. So superintendent, business manager, building principal, other, as approved by superintendent.
Then if you go to the next page over, we said, we wanted to add the principal, let me see, shall approve, same there. We wanted to carry the same people over,
Okay.
the principal and the
Superintendent.
other as approved by the superintendent. Then in the next one, it shall be the responsibility of the board. We say, the superintendent and business manager to approve, we took out board,
Mhm.
to approve all crowdfunding requests totaling, and we did not put totals in there, we did not have a chance to really, look at what those possibilities might be. I wanna get Pat, laced into this. And then if you go down to approval of sites, again, it should read the same. The superintendent, business manager, principal, other, as approved by superintendent.
Dr. Karen, will we be updated, let's pretend this is approved, will we be updated monthly on crowdfunding campaigns that are actually going
No,
on?
we usually don't do that.
The only reason I ask that is because it might be something that we would, you know, we're members of the community, we might want to support it, but we might have missed it. That might be something that we can help out with, you know, in terms of getting it out there, so just to be
Yeah.
aware of it.
Well, I believe they all go on social media, you all have your designated schools.
Right, and I think a lot of them get shared, they're shared on the individual school
Right.
pages and then often
And
shared.
then you would share them with each other.
Yeah.
So there's no centralized updating mechanism, like, we're not gonna get an email report or anything like that, you're saying?
I didn't plan on it, I mean, we don't do that now,
Okay.
but we can if you'd like.
The only reason I said, just to have a central, like, just so that we could all know what's going on and blast it out there. The other thing I'm thinking about is, crowdfunding campaigns, sometimes, I've seen this happen. Let's say there's a crowdfunding campaign because I don't know, there's not enough books in a classroom. That's something that maybe we should be taking care of and other people might not. I mean, you would either approve or not approve, but if it's like, if it lets us know that there's an issue that maybe we should be addressing as a board, and that if it comes up, then it might be good to know. I did some crowdfunding for a school project at one point,
Yeah.
and then when the community found out about it, actually, and then when the board ended up finding out about it, in my experience, they're like, oh no, we will pay for that. You know, it's our responsibility. So just to be like open, you know, in terms of communication, so that we know what's going on, I feel like that would be helpful. But I mean, if it's all published on a website, that would be a form of centralized reporting, just as long as I know where to go to find out.
And okay, I get what you're saying about a report, but this isn't really money that's going to be infused into the budget.
Mm-mm.
No,
This is money that,
And I would be able to determine if we're paying for textbooks, you don't need to do this
right,
for textbooks.
so
You would
perhaps
deny
is
it.
that where it shall be back up to the top of this page, it shall be the responsibility of the superintendent, business manager, principal, other, as approved by the superintendent, to approve all crowdfunding requests totaling. I know you said you wanted to bring Pat in on
Yeah.
that, but this isn't really a monetary thing, so it's totaling anything.
Yeah.
Any amount of money anybody wants to raise needs to come through you. And the only reason it would come before the board is if there were a situation where somebody said, I'm determined to raise $100,000 to buy new bleachers,
Well,
which
Dr.
wouldn't really
Friday
happen, right?
came to me today and said, I'd like to do some crowdfunding to the tune of, how much was it?
I actually, 200 million, I kind of was thinking we could all buy a lottery
Yeah.
ticket.
Yes.
And put Scranton School District on it.
Yeah, that's a good idea too.
So I will bring something up though. I think, and we'll have to ask HASBO for their direction on this. But once a year, you are to receive a report on all of the activity accounts in the school district. So I'm not sure, because I think this is a new frontier run, I'm not sure about crowdfunding. We're going to have to investigate that, and we'll have Pat look into that. But it may be something that you will get a report at the end of the year. I don't know, okay? We're going to look for direction because it is a new policy between PSBA and HASBO to find out.
As we're having this discussion, it's going through my mind. So let's say 20 teachers decide to do this for different specific reasons.
Yeah, but that's kind of where I was going next.
Yeah.
Is, do we know offhand
And
how many
you're-
of these things are
you're-
occurring right now?
If I could just finish, and then we'll piggyback what Tom has to say, but I'm thinking, if I have a building and 20 teachers are doing this in my building, you approve them, so I have a copy of what's going on. Is this money going into the student activity account? Who's handling the money?
I'm sitting here saying, that's what we need to have clarity on. I think it's a policy that we have to work through. And so we have the administrative regulations that will follow that. But we need to understand, because if we have to, then there has to be
An accounting at the school,
of that.
in the school
Should go-
activity
It
fund.
should go to the student activity
Right.
account, and then we would get a list of that.
Right, now, crowdfunding usually is done online,
online.
and it's usually not done in cash. Right?
I think it's like Venmo or,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, there's
Cash App or
payment
something.
methods other than cash.
There has to be some,
And then
Control.
some control over
I
this,
agree.
because I know just from my experience as doing audits, you will have 9 times more problems with activity accounts than you do with the general accounts, as far as money being
Right.
scattered around.
Right.
And because of the unusual way money is raised, and the lack of controls, the professional controls that you have in the general fund, I'd be very, very careful about something like this, because if it goes astray, you know who's gonna get blamed for it. Well, what are they doing, you know, Scranton, of course they can, well, because, you know, this is a loosey-goosey way of playing with money, and,
But I think that's why it's good that we're having this conversation right now, because this is happening.
because, you know,
It's not as though we're
when you,
determining this policy and it's going to inspire
It was
people
brought
to do
up
it. They're
before.
already doing it.
it was brought up before, is this gonna be reported to the board? It better be reported to the board, and it better be thoroughly examined by the business office, and to assure that there are adequate internal controls on something like this. Because, you know, whenever something is loose, it'll create a problem.
So I have two things that I'd like to say quickly. I think if we do adopt this, which I think it's a good idea, we have to make sure that the communication is broad and gets to everyone, PTAs, teachers, administrators, and everyone in between. And secondly, I think there also should be, as part of this policy, a response to some kind of crowdfunding that is raised to somebody's attention that we didn't approve prior. How do we respond to that specific issue? Because I would think 99% of the time it will be done in a positive light to try to raise money for certain things, and they may not have known the process. However, that 1% of the time that there is some ill intent and they use our name and they didn't go through the process, you know, I think that there should be something. Although I know that's a broad term and a broad brush to paint, but I bet you it will come up.
Every fundraiser that's done in your building, you're aware of. And if this is already happening, I would hope that we're aware of where it's happening. And then at the end of the fundraiser, that money goes into the student account. There's a voucher. The building principal signs off on it. The person receiving the money signs off on it. There's internal controls. And then and it goes to the business office and the disbursement of money. But with this, it's not cash. So how do we control that?
Right, there'll have to be some kind of accounting measure.
Yes.
That's why I
That's
think
why
we'll have to
Pat
go
needs to be involved.
Yeah, and
Big time.
the organization, PASBO will have some guidance on that, I'm sure.
I was worried about volume. 10 teachers from 10 different schools have 100 different accounts. Now, all of a sudden, Pat Laffey has 100 different
Right.
accounts thrown in his lap.
That's a great point. And that's a great point. But the thing that scares me is if we don't have control over this now and it's existing, how do we know where that money is?
You don't know,
Yeah.
period.
Well, I know South did it a couple of years ago. It's not widespread. South did it for calculators. Does anybody remember that?
That was, I think, that was right after I left. That was for PSSAs.
Right, they did it for calculators. You know, the funding source came into the central point. It was given right to the company to purchase the items, the calculators, and it was accounted for in the school activity fund.
That's what I'm saying. That's what should be occurring, and that's what Greg
Yeah.
says, because that money has to be
And
audited.
then you see that at some point. You don't
That's
see
right.
it monthly.
Right.
To Tom's point about a monthly accounting. You would not see that monthly. Normally.
See it.
I know, every activity
Right.
account has to be approved by the board.
Right.
And I think the same control should be put on any of this type of funding. If it's not approved by the board, I don't think it should exist. Because you know, I'm not trying to throw water on this, but you have to have accountability. Kids and cash, bad.
And there has to be internal controls.
Oh, it has to be.
So you need administrative regulations very specific to follow this up. So every building principal knows how to account for it. It
And
might go
every
through,
organization.
right, might go through Venmo or Cash App or any of those, or a credit card, but they still have to have a record of it. There has to be a record that gets turned over, so. there's so
I
much
just think
in
of the
this.
nightmare of our candy bar sales.
I know.
And that kid that comes in and says, my candy bars were stolen, and there's a whole case of candy bars gone.
I mean, the good news is there won't be money, it'll be.
It won't be cash.
Yeah, it won't be cash, but still there has to be a record.
There, we'll let Pat
Yeah.
reach out and get involved in that.
So we'll move forward cautiously on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the start.
And we'll make adjustments to this policy, mentioning things like, the board designates the superintendent to put, controls in place, communication plan, blah, 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 which you just all said. Communication, response for ill intent, school, activity fund, internal controls, accounting, right? And then that would all be found in the admin reg. So we need time to work on this.
Yeah.
This will not be ready for your next board meeting.
There's also quite a bit of information on page 5 of this about the use of crowdfunding and like, there's already a lot of that here, so. I think this is very positive.
So if you'll give us time, we'll work on the policy, on this piece, with our red and green.
Yes.
We'll bring it back to you to take a look at. Then we'll see what we may have missed or not missed, and then from there, if you decide to take it for a vote, we'll work on ARs.
Sounds good. Anyone have any other policies they're dying to talk about? Paul?
I would
I do not, thank you.
Well, the first policy we determined is an administrative regulation. So that is outside of our purview. So that's where we are with that. This one with the green information that's where we'll stand, and with the point spread that Dr. Kirian recommended in the email that came in our packets. So that's where we are, and it's not coming back to us for a vote, correct?
Right, ARs are administrative ways of how we do things.
So what was in this email is where we're at?
Yes. Motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.